I'm delighted to say we've been joined by the one and only Jimmy Page. Jimmy, hello, good afternoon, sir. How are you?
Well, good afternoon. Really good to see you, Simon.
How are you doing? Are you excited with all this, with all the new Led Zeppelin stuff, the remixes, the reissues? Is this buzzy and exciting for you? Because a lot of people are beside themselves with enthusiasm, the fact they want to get their hands on this stuff.
Yeah, they're not remixes. They're actually sort of mixes that were done at the time.
Yes, exactly.
Of the record. Yeah, because that's very important to the whole of the sort of scenario and picture of it. There've been a number of sort of live performances that have come out with Led Zeppelin over the last decade, the last few years, and it's really good to have this opportunity to be able to put out the studio albums with what effectively is a companion disc, giving an insight into what was going on at the time of the recordings. The real point of access to the intent of all of this stuff is the version of Whole Lot of Love, because that goes to show that the backbone of what it is and the structure of the number before the choruses go on it, before the guitar overdubs go on it. Also, you can then see what sort of work went into all of these things, afterwards with the overdubs. In those days, and certainly on that, it was 8-track recording, analog recording, and in those days you had to be pretty definitive with whatever you were going to be putting on your overdubs and things. You didn't have the time at your disposal or the recall that you would now have maybe with digital recording, but this is how everybody recorded in those days, but we were just very, very good.
You were very good. That's probably the understatement. That's the understatement of the year. Just on Whole Lot of Love then, as you mentioned that, was it like an aid memoir for you to sit back and listen to these other tracks and then remember the times when you were putting it together, or are those days in the studio kind of permanently etched in your mind anyway?
Well, you see, I was a producer of the band, so I actually, in effect, I was at the studio more times than the rest of the band, and I had subsequent to that, I had a number of quarter-inch mixes from the time, and I sort of kept those pretty safe through the years. It was pretty good, because over the set of these releases going right through to Coda, there's the major percentage of it is stuff that never came out on bootleg, so that's pretty good.
You can't keep a secret now, but you could keep secrets then. It seems amazing that we've waited such a long time to hear these other versions and the outtakes. How have you been able just to sit on it, Jimmy?
It wasn't a question of sitting on it. It's always a time, and it's a question of timing, isn't it? There'd been a few CDs put out of ours, but I knew that we could do better than what they were. I mean, it was a massive shock, to be honest with you, listening to CDs after vinyl, I've got to tell you.
Explain why?
Why? Because they sounded like everything had got strangled. And
do you agree with Neil Young that really it didn't have the soul of a piece of vinyl?
It didn't have the headroom of it. It didn't have the sonic quality that was there on vinyl. So, I went through the whole of the catalogue remastering at that point of time. That's 20 years ago. We're still talking about CDs there, and there's been such a revolution in how things have been listened to since then. It's been the whole digital revolution, there've been sort of iPlayers, MP3, and this. It's almost as though you need to sort of have a good sort of analysis of how your music's heard every 10 years, because there's so many developments on how things are done. So what was going to happen here was it was going to go back to the original analog, and I went in and mastered all the studio albums with somebody called John Davis.
What does that actually mean, Jimmy? When you master an album, what is it that you're doing physically?
Well, you're giving it some TLC. No, but in effect, it's sort of re-EQ'd, slightly compressed maybe, but the minimum of everything, because these tapes sound so good, how they originally were, and it's more a question of getting the best out of what you've got. So that actually now translates through into a vinyl market, because that's sort of starting to flourish a bit, isn't it? Into CDs, and certainly into the aspect of digital. So we now have digital files of really high resolution, so that no matter what format may come in, we're covered with that. That's sort of basically what it is. You're getting the best out of the analog with today's sort of mastering techniques. That's what it involves, okay? However, I think you're probably hearing sort of every other day about artists who are remastering their catalogues, but this has been a thorough analysis right across the board, I'll tell you. I had an idea many years back about having something which involved the various stripped down versions of things, alternate versions of things like Since I've Been Loving You, songs that people have never even heard before that we may have recorded at that time. I listened to hundreds of hours of tapes to arrive at this, and I knew it was an epic task, because you can't leave any stone unturned on this, or any tape not listened to. So it involved hundreds of hours of listening.
So you're sitting back, you've listened to all this stuff, clearly a huge project which you've undertaken.
Yeah.
And I was just after a moment where you thought to yourself, my goodness, we were good. Whole Lot of Love is fine with me.
Yeah, but no, but I knew we were. I knew we were really good from the first album onwards. I'm not being arrogant about that. It's just a fact, isn't it? There's 4 master musicians.
From track 1. I mean,
well, from Good Times, Bad Times.
Which we've already played, but from that first chord, you know that you're into something really special.
Those first chords have got such intent and drama to it, and then all of a sudden the world's let loose to this incredible bass drum technique of John Bonham, and here's a band the likes of which nobody's heard before. There's nothing that's come close to this whole approach to that first album. Is the most incredible debut album, because it has so many ideas on it, so many textures. It's got so many new approaches to whatever it be, the blues or whatever. Other people hadn't quite come to those conclusions.
So shall we play A Whole Lot of Love? And if so,
you can play the Whole Lot of Love, which is from the companion disc.
The companion disc.
Yes,
version.
I'd like you to play that.
Okay. And as the master producer behind it, then Jimmy, what are we looking out for? What are we listening out for on this? Perfect.
Why don't you play it first, and we'll talk about it afterwards.
All right. Okay. Whole Lot of Love, alternative version. Jimmy Page will explain more in a second. Lot of Love from the companion audio disc which goes alongside Led Zepp 2. Jimmy Page is here. You've teased us and taunted us then, Jimmy, so I think we've picked up on a few differences because you've alluded to it. Just unpack that for us.
Well, you've just heard that. I know that it's just brought such a smile to everybody's face who's been listening to it, and it goes to show the whole attitude of this band and the performance from each individual that was in it, you know, from John Bonham and John Paul Jones, Robert Plant. I mean, his vocal's fantastic on this, isn't it? This is the essence of the Whole Lot of Love. Quite clearly you've heard that he doesn't have the chorus on it, or some of the sort of signature guitar overdubs, but you can hear that the middle section that you've all heard with all the sort of with the detuned guitar that goes on there and all the sort of swirling effects that comprise that pretty radical middle on the studio album. You hear that it's all there open, and you know there's obviously a master plan for that, and that's what you hear in the final version. But this has got, it's just the raw energy of it, and when that you know, when the first chorus goes by but it's not there, you know, it's slightly unsettling maybe for the first time that you hear it, but it's got just this intensity, this almost voodoo rhythm that's going on.
How much more is there, Jimmy? Because you've whetted our appetite.
How much more? Well,
yeah. How much more are you sitting on?
I'm not sitting on anything now, because it's all there ready to go across the whole of the albums. The scheduled releases now over whatever it is, the next sort of 18 months, which will be from album 1 straight through to or through. It's not straight through; it comes in stages through to Coda. So that's nine albums that are covered. The very first album isn't studio material. Everything else is, but the very first album, the companion disc to that, it's a live performance from the Olympia in Paris. The audience are fantastic. They're really wild, and And the band's just sheer adrenaline and energy, and there's only one track that was left over from the first album, so I couldn't really do a companion disc with one track.
Really.
I don't think I can't get away with that. So the live performance at Olympia is it. That's what goes as a companion material for Led Zeppelin 1, but it's a pretty exciting concert.
There's a huge frustration when you're talking about live concert, because everyone else knows that we're never going to be able to have that ever again, you know, so that's you're
well, it looks like it, doesn't it?
Yeah,
no,
I know that's not your fault particularly, but
no,
we blame the singer.
I didn't blame anybody. I said it wasn't my fault.
No, I know, I'm doing it on your behalf. It's a frustration, Jimmy, isn't it, really? I'm just speaking on behalf of the country here.
Hey, listen, Simon, we just got to face the facts, haven't we? The Celebration Day DVD came out, you know, whatever it was. It's Christmas before last, isn't it? Around that time, just before that. That's when the DVD was released. The actual concert was in 2007. We're now 2014. And there hasn't, you know, from my knowledge, I mean, somebody was saying to me about Freddie Bannister was saying that he's got Led Zeppelin at Glastonbury. Well, I haven't been approached with that information from anybody who was an ex-band member, so it doesn't look very likely, does it?
Well, when Robert says the chances of it happening are 0, that has no wriggle room, it seems to me, you know. I mean, the Eagles said, you know, famously, we'll get back together when Hell Freezes Over, and then they release a live album called Hell Freezes Over, so stranger things have happened.
Well, I guess it's his decision, isn't it?
I guess it is.
Yeah.
Do you have ambitions, then, beyond this, Jimmy? Do you have ambitions to write new stuff?
I have music that I've written that hasn't been recorded and certainly not played in a live situation, but because all this stuff has been done and stockpiled and basically ready to go on the times when their releases are scheduled, that gives me time to actually now start shifting my focus from that on to sort of being seen to be playing, which is very important. You know, people say, "Oh, do you play the guitar?" I mean, at home. Well, of course I do, but I'm not playing the guitar at home as much as if I was concentrating now when working with musicians, and that's exactly what I want to be doing.
You want to get on stage again?
Yeah, well, I love playing live.
How long are we going to have to wait, Jimmy?
I don't know. Let's see. But that's my next focus. So I'm pretty determined, so if everything goes well with that, that should serve as, you know, hopefully I'll be playing next year.
Well, that's something to look forward to. Meantime, we have all the...
We've got lots of treats coming.
Lots of treats, and super deluxe box sets, digital downloads, vinyl, single LPs, deluxe edition double albums, and so on. Loads and loads of stuff to come. I was going through... I have a jukebox on my wall at home.
Yeah.
I have an old Rockola. And Zeppelin famously didn't do any singles. But I've got a 7-inch of Stairway to Heaven, which is on there. And I was thinking, how did that ever happen? Because I thought that wasn't supposed to
Do you know, I'd love
exist.
to explain to you about this whole thing about not doing singles. Because I'd been in the Yardbirds, and that was really formative to what's going to come in Led Zeppelin, or what I was doing actually in there. But yeah, in many ways, and especially this one, because the Yardbirds were sort of locked into having to make singles, and from what I'd learnt from the Yardbirds and playing all the underground circuit over there, where we built up a really, really big following, was that those people weren't listening to singles. They just thought of it as pop music, you know. So when it's said Led Zeppelin don't do singles, but, you know, people know that there's singles out. I'd just like to explain what it means in context. It's the fact that if you'd have been doing singles and albums that related to singles, when you did albums that related to singles, what was AM Airplay over in America, when you did the second album, it would be assumed by the record company, almost slightly dictated, that you'd have to have something that related to that AM market, the pop market, and the single that might have been successful from the first album. Let's say it was, because then you're having to chase that. I definitely didn't want to get into any of that sort of scenario. It made things difficult for reviewers with our albums, because when the third album came out, they were saying, well, you know, where's the Whole Lot of Love? Where's this? Where's that? Well, that was on the second album, thank you very much. On the third album, you've got Immigrant Song, and you've got Since I've Been Loving You, and goes on through the whole pattern of the releases. But that's why we didn't do singles.
So how come I've got this 7-inch of Stairway then?
Well, it depends. It depends on when it came out.
Maybe it's illegal.
I mean, I'll tell you that on Stairway, the record company had asked us if they could put Stairway out. We said no, it's part of an album. A long time later, I found out that it came out in Australia as the acoustic side of Led Zeppelin with that and like Ramble On and something else, and because you couldn't, you couldn't sort of keep your eye on the ball all of the time, and you were doing concerts and recording. But these things did come out. I must say, there's some singles that came out, say in Japan around the first album, second album. They had very interesting sort of picture sleeves and that. The essence of this is the fact that we weren't chasing a singles market, but obviously singles did come out.
Well, with 300 million album sales or whatever it is, Jimmy, you barely needed to do single promotion, did you? So, Jimmy Page, we appreciate you coming in very much. Thank you very much indeed for your time, sir.
Thank you very much, Simon. Backbone of what it is, and the structure of the number before the choruses go on it, before the guitar overdubs go on it. Also, you can then see what sort of work went into all of these things, afterwards with the overdubs. In those days, and certainly on that, it was 8-track recording, analog recording, and in those days you had to be pretty definitive with whatever you were going to be putting on your overdubs and things. You didn't have the time at your disposal or the recall that you would now have maybe with digital recording, but this is how everybody recorded in those days. But we were just very, very good.
You were very good. That's probably the understatement. That's the understatement of the year. Just on Whole Lotta Love, then, as you mentioned that, was it like an aid memoir for you to sit back and listen to these other tracks and then remember the times when you were putting it together, or are those days in the studio kind of permanently etched in your mind anyway?
Well, you see, I was a producer of the band, so I actually, in effect, I was at the studio more times.
I'm delighted to say I've been joined by the one and only Jimmy Page. Jimmy, hello, good afternoon, sir. How are you?
Well, good afternoon. Really good to see you, Simon.
How are you doing? Are you excited with all this, with all the new Led Zeppelin stuff, the remixes, the reissues? Is this buzzy and exciting for you? Because a lot of people are beside themselves with enthusiasm, the fact they want to get their hands on this stuff.
Yeah, they're not remixes. They're actually sort of mixes that were done at the time of the record. Yeah, because that's very important to the whole of the sort of scenario and picture of it. There've been a number of sort of live performances that have come out with Led Zeppelin over the last decade, the last few years, and it's really good to have this opportunity to be able to put out the studio albums with what effectively is a companion disc, giving an insight into what was going on at the time of the recordings. The real point of access to the intent of all of this stuff is the version of Whole Lot of Love, because that goes to show that than the rest of the band. And I had subsequent to that, I had a number of quarter-inch mixes from the time, and I sort of kept those pretty safe through the years. It was pretty good, because over the set of these releases going right through to Coda, there's the major percentage of it is stuff that never came out on bootleg, so that's pretty good.
You can't keep a secret now, but you could keep secrets then. It seems amazing that we've waited such a long time to hear these other versions and the outtakes.